Chapter 5. Unveiling the powerful Black Madonna of Freedom and the Egyptian goddess Isis. Grant me this grace, Madonna Bernatella. Grant me this grace with your mercy, as you granted me the miracle of your star. When I saw your beautiful face, your beautiful black face, I understood where true love lies, and I understood that you are eternity. Canto della Madonna Brunatella, song to the Madonna known as the Little Dark One. Lyrics by Alessandra Belloni, music by John La Barbara, dedicated to Dario Bolini. I was immensely fascinated by the mountain region around Monte Vergine, that ancient sacred mountain of Mama Sciavona and the goddess Sybil. This beautiful province of Avellino and Benevento, now known as Irpinia, had been part of the focus of my research. Later in 1986, I decided to write my own version of the Sicilian tragedy La Lupa by Giovanni Verga, with music by J. La Barbara. It's about a woman believed to be a witch because of her erotic powers over men. I felt drawn to learn more about this fascinating culture and decided to do in-depth research on the tradition of Southern Italian witchcraft. I had to spend time in this beautiful but spooky area. The whole area has a very mystical feel, with haunting medieval castles, wild nature, forests, rivers, and huge trees. The famous Fiume Sabato, or Sabbath River, runs near Benevento, a town known for centuries for its witches' dance around the mythical walnut tree. An aura of history permeates the ancient land of the Samnites, which was named Beneventum, a Latin word meaning good wind, by the Romans who first colonized it. An inner province of Campania, bordering the regions of Molise and Puglia. It is a mountainous, rugged territory with an average elevation of 900 meters. There are also a number of large river basins, such as the Fortore and Volturno, and the Valle del Calore, once occupied by a vast lake. In the 5th century BCE, the area was called Samnium and was part of Magna Graecia. The Samnites were semi-nomadic people who used guerrilla combat techniques. They managed to hold the Romans at bay until 290 BCE. The Samnites were always proud of their roots, and as Cicero remarked, they never wanted to speak Latin. Driven by great curiosity, I went once more to visit my good friend Guido in Montesarchio, a town near Benevento. I asked Guido if he could help me look for the mythical walnut tree so I could deepen my research on witchcraft and find my inspiration for my interpretation of La Lupa. You might recall that at age 14 I had the great blessing of being cast by the legendary Italian actress Anna Magnani to play her niece in La Lupa, so I felt a special affinity to the story. Even though my father ultimately didn't let me accept the role, losing the role and losing a young love at the same time inspired me to write my own version and portray the lead character as a tarantata, a woman bitten by love, trapped in a patriarchal society. The great Sicilian writer Giovanni Verga's play is about a woman in her late 40s called Pina, who is accused of being a witch because she expresses her sexuality freely. No one can resist Pina, not even the local priest. They called her La Lupa, the she-wolf, because she could not get enough of anything. The townspeople also think Pina killed her husband with a magic spell. One day Pina falls madly in love with a young man named Nanni, who cannot resist her and is taken by a great passion for her. They become lovers and the whole town knows it. Then Pina, La Lupa, offers Nanni her innocent and pure daughter in marriage, as long as they stay together in the same house. It is then that the sinful love triangle begins, to her daughter's great shame and pain. The sinful Pina is banned from the town. Her lover is forced to go through penance by the church authorities and is sent away, which causes Pina to go completely mad without her lover. Haunted and bewitched by La Lupa, Nanni decides to kill her as they make love one last time. I remember watching La Lupa in the theater with my mother when I was a kid, before I had met Anna Magnani. I was bewitched by Magnani's powerful stage presence, especially during that last scene. She opened her blouse and offered her breast to her lover, an actor who was also her lover in real life, a man much younger than she, so he could stab her and end her misery. To me, La Lupa was a martyr, not a witch. When I decided to rewrite and perform La Lupa, in New York, I had to do deep research on the magic of southern Italy and the history of the Tarantate, the women who suffered from Tarantismo. To create my own story, I felt that I had to begin in Benevento's famous area of the witches, where they performed their magic rituals around the mythical walnut tree for centuries. In my research, I discovered that southern Italians attribute the beginning of witchcraft to Salome and Herodias after the beheading of St. John the Baptist. Legend says that both women craved the unattainable holy man and then demanded his death from King Herod. When John the Baptist's head was brought to them on a silver platter, it magically began to speak and cursed them, condemning them to Roman darkness forever. During the rites of the summer solstice, which later became the feast of St. John the Baptist, the witches symbolically invoked the two sinful women, Salome and Herodias, as they dance wild erotic dances around the walnut tree of Benevento. In my adaptation of the play, La Lupa and her daughter are reincarnations of Salome and Herodias. La Lupa was born on the night of the summer solstice during one of those magic rituals around the walnut tree. In the last part of the play, I portray her as a tarantata, a woman suffering from the bite of love, which ultimately makes her go completely mad, driving her to her own death. Before I began the writing process, I wanted to understand who these witches of Benevento were. I wanted to discover if they were falsely accused and burned because the priests were afraid of women's power, just like in the play La Lupa. I was also curious about the dances performed during these rituals. I found books with great drawings of the tarantella performed around the walnut tree. This depicted the tradition during the Middle Ages of men and women wearing masks and outrageous costumes, dancing, spinning, and playing tambourines. I discovered that the area surrounding Benevento was an ancient sacred site of the goddess Isis, known also as the Queen of the Dead. This is why so many Black Madonnas are found in these powerful sites, often located in the middle of nature. To fully understand the relationship of the cult of Isis to the Black Madonna, one must know her myth. The cult of Isis. During Roman times, the cult of Isis, the Egyptian goddess of the moon, proliferated in Benevento, so much so that the Emperor Domitian had a temple erected in her honor. Within this cult, Isis was a sort of trimurti, a triad. She became identified with Hecate, goddess of the underworld, and Diana, goddess of the moon and the hunt. These deities were also connected with magic. The cult of Isis probably stands on the basis of some elements of paganism that survived in succeeding centuries. For instance, the characteristics of some witches can be connected with those of Hecate, Janara, the same term used for witches in Benevento, arguably could be derived from the name of Diana, the black moon goddess with many breasts. To this day, there is a statue of the goddess Isis hidden in Benevento Cathedral. One of the most frightening experiences of my life happened during a powerful night of the full moon in the middle of the forest surrounding Benevento. I had convinced Guido to take Dario and me to meet Guido's friend, a violinist virtuoso who claimed that he knew exactly where the mythical walnut tree was. Although I have blocked out his name, probably on purpose, I shall never forget his face, his eerie smile, and the magical, unexpected powers he had when he played the violin. The violinist agreed to take us to this secret legendary place, which he knew because his grandmother had shown it to him. When we met him at his house, he told us to pick white roses and to wear them as protection against evil powers. I was a little scared, I will admit, yet I did not take him too seriously. Dario, who did not believe in much, thought that it was all a joke. The four of us, the violinist, Dario, Guido, and me, drove to a secret spot in the forest, in a valley surrounded by mountains, near the famed Sabbath River, from which the rites of the Sabbath derive. The violinist told us to descend a hill after we stopped the car on a flat part of the road. With his violin in his hands, he said, "Follow me, I will take you to the secret meeting place. I know how to play and conjure the witches to dance around the tree, and who will invoke the Queen of the Dead, Hecate. But only if they accept you will they appear. You must play the tambourine with me." As we followed the violinist down the path through the giant trees in the forest with no clue of where we were going, I could hear the river in the distance. When we stopped close to the Sabbath River, the violinist laughed as he began to play a haunting, piercing melody with ferocity. He blurted out that he could bring back the witches. Playing the fast tarantella triplets with him on the violin, I kept praying that we would be protected. In what seemed like a moment, everything shifted. The trees around us were not trees anymore, but giant dark figures, moving silhouettes undulating in the darkness. At times they were illuminated by the light of the full moon. I could see women with long hair and flowing skirts. I could hear laughter and cries of happiness, not of sorrow. The whole forest had transformed as the mad violinist played in a fury, and I accompanied him with my tambourine. Dario stared at me in shock, pointing at my hands. He said, "Alessandra, le tue mani sono diventate verde." Your hands have turned green. In complete surprise, I stared at my playing hands. A strong green light emanated from my fingers as I played the fast tarantella rhythm. Yes, my hands are green. Aiuto, help, I cried. I stopped playing and looked at the evil violinist, who was still laughing, looking menacing and otherworldly. I laid my tambourine down flat. Then, as I tried to ask him what the hell was going on, my tambourine suddenly flipped up by itself and started rolling toward the river. Again I heard laughter and saw dark silhouettes, which seemed to be inviting us to go to the Sabbath River. The violinist yelled, "They are waiting for you, Alessandra. They want you to go down to the river by the walnut tree. The witches and the Queen of the Dead. Aha, aha." I jumped in terror, managed to get a hold of my tambourine, and told Dario and Guido, "Let's get out of here now." That's when I noticed that the white roses we had worn for protection from the spirits had vanished. The violinist did not want to leave, however. He said, "You asked for this, now you have to stay." But I didn't. Without hesitation, I started running toward the car, chanting the chant to the Black Madonna of Montevergine at full volume, asking for her protection. Dario was running ahead of me. I had never seen him run so fast. He turned to ask me to please stop tapping his shoulders. Since I was holding the drum, I was obviously not tapping his shoulders. Some invisible being was doing so. When he realized this, Dario turned white and ran even faster toward his car, which, when we arrived, began magically to move all by itself. The car was physically rolling away from us. Working together, Dario, Guido, and I were able to slow the car and bring it to a stop. Thank God it was a small Fiat and not very heavy. By this time, the violinist had stopped playing. He looked almost like his normal self again, only he did not say much. He was amused, but also upset that we had interrupted the ritual he had successfully begun in our honor to invoke the power of the witches of Benevento. I never saw him again. The witches of Benevento. It seems that the legend of the witches of Benevento dates back to the Samnite peoples and the Roman classical period. In the 4th century BCE, the ancient colonists of Magna Graecia, transplanted to the Samnium, practiced the orgiastic worship of Sibyl. This is when Ovid sang of the horrendous Styx yearning for children's blood. By 1600, the saga had spread rapidly throughout Europe. Unlike other towns where the witches had an evil reputation, Benevento's mythology suggests that they were inspired poets and artists for centuries. Legend has it that belief in the existence of the witches mixed with echoes of the mysterious orgiastic rites of the Lombards who had settled in Benevento, the capital of their vast southern duchy. Benevento's chief physician, Pietro Piperno, tells this in his 1639 essay, De Nuce Maga Beneventana, on the magical walnut tree of Benevento. It is told that on the night between Saturday and Sunday, the witches had the custom to meet around a big walnut tree to give birth to their demonic Sabbath. They arrived at the meeting place by flying on the handles of their brooms, and after having rubbed themselves with a miraculous unguent, which gave them not only the ability to fly, but also to become invisible to indiscreet eyes, this is what they chanted. Unguent, unguent, carry me to the walnut tree of Benevento, above the water and above the wind, and above all other bad weather. Around the great walnut tree, a savage jumble would begin. People feared these women and believed that they had the ability to pass under doors during the night. According to the testimony of the presumed witches, the walnut tree must have been tall, an evergreen, and of a noxious nature. There are various hypotheses about where on the riverbank of the Sabbath the walnut tree was located. The legend does not rule out that there could have been more than one tree. The popular belief that Benevento was the Italian witches' gathering place has abundant implications, blurring the border between reality and imagination. Many hypotheses on the birth of the witches' legend exist. Likely, the synergy of several elements has given Benevento its lasting fame as the city of the witches. In his essay, Pietro Piperno traced the roots of the witch legend back to the 7th century, when Benevento was the capital of a Lombard duchy. The invaders, although they had formerly converted to Catholicism, did not renounce their traditional pagan religion. Instead, they worshipped a golden viper, perhaps winged or with 2 heads. This may have had a connection to the cult of Isis, as the goddess was able to control serpents. The Lombards developed a singular ritual of hanging the hide of a goat on a tree near the Sabbath River in honor of their god Wotan, father of the gods. The Christians of Benevento interpreted these frenzied rites based on their existing beliefs about witches. In their eyes, the Lombard warriors were witches, the goat was the incarnation of the devil, and the cry suggested orgiastic rites. It's likely the gatherings under the walnut tree, one of the main features of the witch legend, probably derived from Lombard customs. However, these practices are also found in the cult of the moon goddess Artemis, who is similar to Isis. The first centuries of the diffusion of Christianity were characterized by a harsh battle against the pagan, rural, and traditional culti, which resulted in the demonization of rituals like those of the women in Benevento. They became witches in popular culture. Instead of archetypal mother figures, these women were dedicated to orgiastic rites and knew how to induce infertility and abortions. It became clear to me that the magic rituals in this area, along with the cults in honor of the Black Madonna, were part of the medieval religious history of southern Italy. These rites embodied deep connections to pre-Christian mythology with expressions of Christianity. They were practiced in agricultural settlements by subcultures of the peasants. This pre-Christian history became part of the folk culture, expressed through the local music and social customs. Although I was traumatized by the experience with the mad violinist in the forest, I also realized that I had underestimated the power of the so-called witches of Benevento, the walnut tree, and the Sabbath River. It was clear that this was not merely a myth. They truly existed. They had supernatural powers that came from centuries of highly trained priestesses initiated in the mysteries of the goddess Isis, Sybil, and Diana. They used ecstatic music and dances, tambourines, and later the tarantella. They also utilized the energy that was still surrounding the forest and traditional gathering places. To summon their spirits, you only had to play the right music with certain vibrations, and they would magically appear. This supernatural experience in the forest near Benevento helped me bring to the stage the dance of the witches around the walnut tree of Benevento in my play La Lupa. I also called upon those frightening memories to help me get into my role as a woman with magical powers who later became a tarantata. I am convinced that many of these supposed witches were wrongly accused of their sins. At the same time, I saw clearly that over time, some of them began to perform their rituals in the darkness and not in the light, perhaps to protect themselves from their accusers. Although I was fascinated by the witches of Benevento and the sacred walnut tree, I could not find out more to keep a distance and to stay in the light of our Blessed Mother, the Black Madonna, who is true wisdom and manifests herself in these places of occult powers to remind us that we are indeed protected by her love. Being guided to the beautiful Madonna Brunetella. There are times in our lives when things seem to happen all at once, creating a vortex of energy from which it is hard to escape. Times when people who have crossed our paths and have made an impact on our heart and soul reappear for specific reasons, often when we are going through difficult experiences and transitions. This is exactly what happened to me between 1986 and 1987, on a physical, spiritual, and emotional level. As I shared with you in my preface, at that time I had been diagnosed with cervical dysplasia. The surgery I had to have, cervical conization, affected me deeply on many levels. I felt powerless at the thought of my womb being cut, and I was very worried about the consequences it would have on me, emotionally and physically, especially since I was told that I would probably never be able to get pregnant or bear children. When I woke up in the hospital recovery room, I had a crystal clear vision of the Black Madonna, embracing me and protecting me. I don't recall how much time had passed in this blissful moment of spiritual awakening by the Black Madonna, but it was so real, and I felt so protected that I never wanted it to end. I did not know which Black Madonna had appeared to me at that time, but I always had a clear picture in my mind of her face and gold crown. I wondered if I would ever find her. 2 years after my miraculous vision in Mount Sinai Hospital, this powerful Black Madonna came to me again in an extraordinary way, in the magical area near Benevento, showing her light and compassion. At the same time, I reconnected with Dario, my lost love, and made up my mind to help him out of his drug addiction and change his life, both with my unconditional love and by bringing him to the Black Madonna. After my transcendent experiences at the Cave of the Sibyl and with the Black Madonna of Montevergine, I really wanted Dario to be my partner, to take photos, shoot videos, and drive with me to remote, deserted areas. Although Dario was intrigued, he was powerless. The conditions of his house arrest stipulated that he couldn't leave his home. After some research, I discovered that in Italy it was possible to get special permission from a judge to get a work release if you were under house arrest. On Dario's behalf, I wrote to the court stating that his work with me was crucial, citing his specialized education in classical studies and his writing skills. I prayed, and by some miracle, the prayers I had offered to the Madonna of Montevergine were effective. Once again, La Madonna granted me grace. Our first journey together was a pilgrimage to Montevergine, the magical mountain of the Black Madonna, Mama Shavona in Irpinia. In addition to doing research, I wanted to thank the Madonna in person. Our visit to the sacred mountain was followed by the haunting, frightening experience near Benevento, with the mad violinist summoning the witches in the forest. To our surprise, we had gone from being high on the sacred mountain, near heaven and blessed by the light of the benevolent Black Madonna, to the darkness of the valley below, in the midst of the thick forest, in the Samnio, by the spooky Sabbath River and the walnut tree of the witches. Dario and I continued our search for the 7 witches in the province of Benevento. Dario and I continued our search for the 7 sisters in the province of Benevento, knowing that we would find more powerful Black Madonnas in that area. One day, in our quest for another Black Madonna, Dario and I got lost in the mountains of that beautiful region. Up to this point, it had been something of a wild goose chase, but I hadn't lost hope. By chance, we ended up in a beautiful church in the town of Moiano, thinking that we were still lost, but instead we were found by the Madonna. It was early afternoon, and no one else was there, just Dario, me, and the church's caretaker. The man welcomed us to the Church of Brunatella, which means the Little Dark One. The caretaker seemed to read us like a book as he told us, "If you need a miracle, she will do it. Just pray and ask her. She will free anyone who believes in her. She is La Madonna della Libera, Our Lady of Freedom." And there she was, the most beautiful statue I have ever seen, a majestic life-size figure fashioned of ebony, totally black, with huge hazel eyes. Her captivating gaze was both austere and benevolent. As I looked at her, the tone of her gaze constantly changed. She wore a bright red dress and was wrapped in a thick blue cape covered with golden stars. On her lap, a black baby Jesus faced out with his right arm raised and his left hand holding his Blessed Mother's hand. She sat on her throne regally, like the queen she is. On her head was a red veil covered by a spectacular gold crown, inlaid with precious jewels and topped with 12 shining stars. I meditated and prayed and suddenly recognized her. This was the Black Madonna who had appeared to me at my hospital bed. I was overcome by emotion, speechless. When Dario and I looked at Brunatella, we both felt an overwhelming love and compassion radiating from her. We stood there in silence and prayed for a long time. At the exact same moment, he and I saw the center star on her solid gold crown move and salute us as if silently telling us, "Come to me." Dario and I looked at each other and then exclaimed in unison, "La stella si muove," the star is moving. Then we both began sobbing, understanding that this was indeed a miracle, unexplainable. It simply was. We felt something inside of us shift, making us comprehend that we were protected by her. I heard a voice saying, "You must believe in me. Have faith. You will make it. Always come back to me." She ended each statement with the words, "Figlia mia," which means my daughter. Dario, who had come from a very different world until then, one that was superficial and self-destructive, received a real miracle of awakening. We were both shaken when we left the church and thanked the caretaker for his illuminating words and advice. The sacristan told us to come back for her feast day on September 8th, adding with a smile, "La Madonna vi aspetta," the Madonna will wait for you. Dario's addiction stopped immediately, and he stayed sober for many years, touched by La Madonna della Libera, who freed him from his dark side. We had asked her for transformation, and from her, Dario received the light, her blessing, and God's blessing. He became religious and spiritual, and was very grateful to me for bringing him to the light. After this miraculous experience at the Church of Brunatella, Dario and I felt a deeper love for each other, and also felt more connected to the earth. We both felt that this Madonna was extremely sensual, resembling Isis in her enigmatic face. That same day we took a ride in the stunning mountains of the Benevento region. Breathing its fresh, stimulating air, Dario and I lay down near the ruins of an ancient castle and made passionate love, right on the ground, as if going back thousands of years to perform the sacred marriage as an ancient rite of initiation to Mother Earth. In ancient times this was known as hieros. This magical erotic experience would remain inside us forever and created a strong bond very hard to break. It seemed that we both went back into some ancient time. I felt that we had lived together in a past life. We had been a priest and a priestess initiated in the mysteries of the goddess and had been magically brought back together by the Black Madonna to continue our karma, following a sacred path. Later I wrote a love song for Dario about our miracle of the star titled Canto della Madonna di Brunatella, which became a beautiful part of the opera, The Voyage of the Black Madonna. I wrote the lyrics, and John LaBarbera wrote the music. It is the song I shared in the beginning of this chapter. The procession of La Madonna della Libera. After receiving the miracle from La Madonna Brunatella, I knew that Dario and I must keep our promise to become part of the procession on her feast day on September 8th. I was told that in this particular procession, the older women had kept alive an ancient tradition of archaic chants to the Madonna that was unique to their town. Anthropologists and ethnomusicologists have noted that these haunting chants, with their unique harmonies, melodies, dissonance, and vocal production, are remarkably similar to the singing of the famous Bulgarian women's choirs. I could never imagine the power and impact these women and their voices would have on me. When Dario and I arrived on the morning of September 8th, the procession had already begun. From experience, I had learned that the fastest way to catch up with the Madonna and her celebratory band and singers who moved through the entire town was to ask the local police. Dove è la Madonna? They all knew where she was because they had to block the roads as the procession passed. Dario and I ran in the direction they indicated, he with the video camera and me with my tape recorder. When we first laid eyes on the procession, Dario and I were startled by the huge crowd. The band played strange, out-of-tune melodies, which seemed otherworldly, and followed the Queen of Heaven. The statue of the Black Madonna was even more striking in daylight than it had been in the semi-darkened church. La Brunatella was indeed the Queen. Adorned with exquisite jewelry, her shining blue cape studded with stars, she seemed like Egyptian royalty. Her dark skin glowed as though she were alive. Upon seeing her, I burst into tears and couldn't figure out how to work my tape recorder or how to take photographs. It was strange how I was completely overcome. The others in the procession realized that Dario and I weren't locals. They were curious about us, wondering where we were from and why we were there. As we trailed behind the statue, some came right out and asked. I told them that I had come from New York as a devotion to the Black Madonna and was studying her tradition, adding that I was a musician and wanted to write an opera for her. They told me that I must wait for the women singers, since they possess the true knowledge of the songs in the old dialect. From a distance I heard a very odd melody and what seemed like many voices in a dissonant song. As the singers drew closer, I was completely bewitched, practically hypnotized by a group of 15 older women, hugging one another tightly and chanting loudly with their mouths wide open. They produced the most unusual, haunting, discordant harmonies in an ancient Neapolitan dialect that I could not understand. Yet somewhere in the depth of my being I understood, and it moved me to the core. The women saw me and understood that I was completely drawn to them. They permitted me to follow them closely, which was a great honor. I knew that they didn't let everyone do this. Dario was also extremely moved, but thank God he was able to film this remarkable occurrence. I was too awestruck to take photographs or record it. Thanks to Dario, I have this incredible research material on tape. The women's faces are spectacular, with their distinctive old-world features and fervent expressions. These women chanted for at least 8 hours without getting tired. They took turns singing solo and answering in harmony. Although the chant was to the Madonna della Libera, the melody was totally archaic. Using the Lydian scale found in most ancient Neapolitan music, the women walked barefoot as they sang. Their dark brown faces, hands, and legs reminded me of the earth herself. These were the peasant women of the ancient Greek matriarchal society who carried the wisdom and knowledge of the priestesses of the goddess. I wondered if they knew this. Their leader was a woman named Rosetta, who to this day, at age 86, has the most powerful voice I have ever heard. She claims that her voice is the gift of the Madonna Brunatella, who has appeared in her dreams many times. In the dreams, the Madonna revealed to her that she has blessed her with this beautiful voice, so she can sing her praise until the day she dies. All I wanted was to walk beside them, to feel the healing energy coming from those incredibly powerful voices that never tired. I moved beside them, following the statue until the evening, when they entered the church. This is probably the most moving part of the feast, when the Madonna returns to the church and everyone is screaming, "Evviva Maria," while clapping, crying out, and sobbing uncontrollably. It was then that I witnessed something very unusual, something I thought didn't occur anymore since it had been forbidden by the Vatican. As the statue was brought back to the altar, the women chanted, and a group of devotees got down on their knees. Each man or woman had one person leading him or her with a handkerchief tied to the wrist, pulling the devotee along the floor with the head down. The devotees, crawling on their knees, proceeded to lick the ground where the statue had passed. I had never seen anything like it. I almost fainted as I realized what was happening. This was real, incredibly real. The crowd began whispering. Someone told me that the people licking the ground had received miracles, and their vow was to do the strassino, licking of the floor, as a sign of their commitment and to thank the Madonna for her miracle. The chanting of the women continued until everyone had performed the ritual of the strassino. Later, when Dario and I looked back at the video, we could see that the people seemed to be in a collective trance. When the chanting ended, we clearly watched them wake up and come out of it. For me, this will always remain the most moving experience I've had at the feet of the Black Madonna. Later, I recreated it on stage, together with the legend of La Madonna Brunatella. After the procession, I was told of several miracles that had taken place during previous processions. Not too long ago, a mother had brought her daughter, who was mute and had never spoken a word. During the women's chanting at the feet of the statue, the girl began talking for the very first time and was healed by La Madonna della Libera, finally free to speak. Another recent miracle happened to a young teenage boy I met who had fallen under a tractor while working in the fields. Pinned under the tractor, he would certainly have died, but he had a vision of the Madonna della Libera and was miraculously saved, only losing part of his right arm. After witnessing our first procession, Dario and I returned to Moiano every year for 10 years. We became friends with everyone in the town, including the priest in charge of the church, the choir director, the local folk music group Musicalia, and of course with the old women singers. Every year on September 8th, they patiently waited for Dario and me to arrive at the procession. The women generously let me become part of their group, which was always a very moving experience. Dario, who was kind and giving by nature, always brought gifts for all the people we knew in the town. They appreciated this immensely, as the presents came all the way from America. To this day, people in Moiano still ask me about Dario, and it is very emotional for me to return there. I feel his spirit around me. History and tradition of the Black Madonna of Moiano. There is great mystery surrounding this beautiful and miraculous statue, Our Lady of Freedom. Over the years, I learned many interesting stories and legends from my friend, musician Amerigo Cervo, a native of Moiano. This Black Madonna in particular is a centuries-old enigma. The statue has always been at the Church of Brunatella, but no one knows for certain where she came from. She was originally in another church that was destroyed by a fire. We know from accounts dating back to 1641 and 1707 that many bishops visited the town, including Bishop Filippo Albini, who wrote, "There is in Moiano a statue of the Blessed Virgin Mother, and through her God works powerful miracles, as shown by the numerous golden offerings that are exhibited by her image. She is known as Our Lady of Freedom, and her statue is made of dark wood. The native people of the town worship her with great devotion." As I researched Santa Maria della Libera, I discovered that according to legend, she arrived mysteriously on a Turkish ship. Starting in the 9th or 10th century, pilgrims began visiting her shrine in Moiano and experienced numerous miracles and cures. It was often said that people had a distinct feeling of serenity after visiting her shrine. Understandably, their extraordinary devotion to her and her miracles haven't waned over the centuries. They've only grown stronger. The Church of Moiano itself is very old and was destroyed during a terrible earthquake in 1514. The church and statue were restored in 1550. During this restoration, they found 9th and 10th century Byzantine coins buried around the statue. On the coins were inscriptions of Constantine VII and Our Lady of the Sign, a Greek icon brought from the Orient. The Madonna of Moiano was restored to the likeness of Our Lady of the Sign. According to the Catholic Church, the Turks invaded Italy in 1571 and would not allow the local people to practice Catholicism in the areas they occupied. In Moiano, victory over the Turks was attributed to the many individuals who prayed to Our Lady of Moiano. She was thereafter called Madonna della Libera, Our Lady of Freedom. Moiano is located in a beautiful natural setting, near the well-known medieval town, Sant'Agata de' Goti, a magical village first founded by the ancient Samnites and later taken over by the Romans, and then the Goths. The town has a haunting appearance, as it ends abruptly at the edge of the river gorge. The people who inhabited both these villages have been known to struggle to earn a living. Extreme poverty forced many to immigrate to America, including the family of New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio. Those who stayed lived off the land in an agricultural society, very close to the earth. It is a town without much history, but rich with devotion to Our Lady of Freedom. The tradition of the devotion and vigil on September 7th. The celebration in honor of the Black Madonna Brunatella begins on August 15th with the Feast of the Assumption. On that day, a flag showing her beautiful image hangs high between two balconies. From this moment, they begin the harvest of wheat and oil, blessed by the Black Virgin. August 30th marks the beginning of the novena, with devotional prayers, as the statue of the Madonna is then taken up to the main altar. The crowd of devotees gets bigger every day until the feast day, which is more celebrated than Christmas. September 7th is the vigil of the feast, with powerful rituals typical of the south of Italy. In the afternoon, the devotees bring the statue of the Black Madonna down from the altar and begin to dress her with two solid gold crowns. One is for baby Jesus. The crowns were made in 1914 with gold that was taken from all the church offerings. Brunatella is then covered with a shining blue cape decorated with golden stars. She is also adorned with golden earrings, necklaces, and bracelets. A black velvet cloth is pinned at the feet of the statue, onto which many golden objects are sewn. In the chapel there is an amazing exhibit of the treasure, a gazebo covered with golden and silver ex-votos of people who have been healed, representing arms, legs, feet, hands, and hearts. At the same time, the ritual dress of the women devotees is blessed by the priest. Until 40 years ago, women actually wore a different type of ceremonial dress, which was white with a blue sash, just as it is done for the other dark Madonnas, known as La Madonna dell'Arco, near Naples. Outside the church, a carriage goes around receiving gifts of food, pasta, chickens, cakes, cookies, and flowers, which are auctioned off the next day at the feast. September 8th, the feast day. The feast begins at 5 in the morning inside the church with great commotion as pilgrims begin coming from nearby villages. There is a morning service at 8 o'clock, and as more pilgrims arrive, the crowd moves down the middle aisle of the church on their knees, crying, sobbing, and asking the Madonna for grace and a miracle. The procession officially begins as the beautiful statue of Brunatella is carried out of the church on the shoulders of men, usually about a dozen. There is normally an auction outside the church among groups of men who challenge each other to carry the Madonna. During the auction, people bring offerings of money and gold to pin to the Madonna's decorations, which are pinned to the arch and throne made of wood that is built around her statue and carried through the streets. The procession goes all over town, even venturing inside tiny alleyways. In every neighboring village there is an explosion of fireworks in honor of the Blessed Mother. As the people in Moiano say, La Madonna deve vedere il fuoco. The Madonna has to see the fire. This is also an ancient ritual. The procession is led by the town's band and the women singers with their amazing haunting voices and melodies. It usually ends around 8 o'clock at night, when Our Lady of Freedom is taken inside the church, carried backward toward the altar. A huge crowd of devotees follows the statue, chanting, crying, going down on their knees, and licking the floor as a sign of devotion in acknowledgement of having received her grace. The women's haunting chant leads the entire ceremony and ritual. Inside the church, the singing becomes more desperate and yearning. The lyrics sung in the old dialect express a feeling of sadness and anguish, which comes from saying goodbye to the Black Madonna, expressing the great pain of leaving her side. Gradually, the church empties. The women who have been chanting and following the procession barefoot are now tired, dirty, sweaty, and hungry. They return home for the ritual dinner. Outside, many lights remain burning, keeping the feeling of the feast alive. The band begins to play traditional tunes. The feast day ends when the last mother comes out of the church with her little boy or girl and gives a last kiss to the statue of the beautiful Madonna Nera della Libera. This ritual and cult of the Black Virgin can be connected with other more ancient ceremonies of pre-Christian origins, typical of the end of summer and dedicated to a goddess of the underworld. The journey into the other world begins in the month of September with the feasts of many Black Madonnas. They seem to express the pain and mourning of the divine feminine over the death of Mother Nature, who is preparing for winter. In many folk legends and traditions, the villagers reenact the mythical death of Mother Nature as plants begin to shed their fruit in abundance and plant their seeds in the ground, in the earth's womb. The ancient ritual connected to the feast in Moiano is the rite of Persephone, the Thesmophorie Atticae, festivals from Attica, a fall ritual celebrated only by women between September and October. The ritual reenacts the descent of Persephone into the underworld with death rites and great celebrations honoring her return to the earth. Persephone was depicted with a black face. This is one of the symbols of the Black Madonna of Moiano, also known as the Queen of the Dead. The early agricultural civilization of southern Italy was mainly a matriarchal society that worshipped the goddess Demeter, Sibyl, and Isis. In the beginning of Christianity, it is clear that the Madonna replaced these female deities, becoming the divine feminine. Traditional rituals for the Black Madonna of Moyano. The tradition of the chickens. During the feast, many chickens are gathered as a strong symbol of the Black Madonna, as in other places like Pagani, for the feast of the Madonna delle Galline, and different cultures in general. Chickens and other birds are associated with the goddess of the underworld and have the shamanic power to lead us into the underworld and meet our shadows. Gold. Gold also connects us to a kingdom that is far away, a heaven that is golden and shiny. It is also connected to fire. Gold is an element traditionally used for burial ceremonies and in cemeteries. It is common in Moyano to bury a person with an image of the Black Madonna. This tradition likely comes from the ancient Egyptians, since the cult of Isis and Osiris had a strong presence in this area. The palms. These are wooden objects shaped like palm leaves and covered with black velvet. On the day of the feast, all the gold and silver offerings are placed on them, and they are carried in procession by women dressed in black and blue. The prayers, the litany, or prayers are chanted during the feast day on September 8th, usually by priests, for monetary compensation. The same ritual is used during the Feast of the Dead near the tombs. The chariot. During the vigil, a chart carried by bulls is taken to a cave to pick up specific stones, which symbolize the mysterious journey into the cave, inside the Great Mother's womb. The ritual dress. Not too long ago, the dress was white with a blue sash for women. Men used to wear these colors when they were chosen to carry the statue in the procession. The color white is also associated with death. In folk mythology, dead people come back to earth to see us during the Feast of the Dead, wearing a white tunic. The meaning and symbolism of the Strasino ritual. The licking of the floor in the Church of Our Lady of Freedom is without a doubt the most powerful and emotional part of the ritual. It has obvious ancient origins and is similar to other forms of devotion and magic rituals in southern Italy. This archaic form of devotion in Moyano has a strong symbolism of death, a connection to the underworld as well as Dante's Inferno. It symbolizes the descent into the subterranean grotto, the mysterious and hypothetical journey of Persephone going into the underworld, symbolically representing death as with the coming of winter, the earth seems to die. When Persephone comes back from Hades, she brings rebirth to all life on earth. To lick the floor of the church means to enter the sacred space, to be part of the mysterious initiation to the divinity, to ask for her protection, and to ensure a direct connection with her without mediation. The Strasino also represents a magical exorcism from death, and it is often done by peasants in agricultural societies. Flagellation and sacrifice, such as shedding your own blood, represent accepting death, the assumption of death, but a controlled and limited death. In the context of the magic ritual, it is known to bring back life. It is also believed that after the shedding of one's blood, we can celebrate a new, protected rebirth in life. As described by Carlo Levi in his book Praestata Deboli, the Madonna with a black face associated with wheat and animals was no longer the mother of God, but rather a divinity from the underworld. She was the peasant Persephone, Isis, queen of the dead, in the shadows of the womb of the earth, the infernal goddess of wheat. The cult of Isis Irpinia and Benevento. As I learned more about the history of Benevento and its surrounding areas, it became clear that the connection between Brunatella and Isis wasn't merely a myth. In my research, I discovered that near Moyano, in Sant'Agata dei Agoti and Benevento, there existed temples of Isis. The esoteric folk tradition in the region was recently connected to the cult of Isis, the most important and complex of all the black goddesses, the African Egyptian mother. As a matter of fact, even renowned author and historian Ian Begg stated that the black virgins, either called Diana or Sybil, are all one, Isis. Born in Africa in 125 CE, the great Roman writer Lucius Apuleius mentioned Isis in his classic book, The Golden Ass. In it, he refers to Isis as the universal goddess, incorporating the attributes of all the other goddesses. I am nature, the universal mother, mistress of all the elements, primordial child of time, sovereign of all things spiritual, queen of the dead, queen also of the immortals, the single manifestation of all gods and goddesses that are. In art, Isis is usually depicted as a black African queen goddess spreading her wings of love. Often she is shown nursing the infant Horus on her lap, and herein lies the origin of the iconography of the Madonna and Child. Even the scepter used by Isis is similar to that of the Black Virgins, as well as the colors of the capes and dresses many of the Madonnas wear. Isis's priests often offer a ship, which is also a symbol of Aphrodite, all of which recall legends like that of Brunatella, of her mysterious arrival on a ship, like many other Black Madonnas. The high priests of Isis also eat the roses that are attached to their sistrum, an ancient Egyptian percussion instrument consisting of a metal frame with transverse metal rods used in the initiation rituals. Isis is associated with the rose blossom as a sacred feminine symbol, just as Mary, the Blessed Mother, is. We see traces of this today, and the chants people still do for the Madonna during the Tamoriata rituals, which proclaim Bella figliola chateciam merosa, which translates roughly to, O beautiful woman, your name is Rose, the most beautiful flower found in paradise. This rose symbolically refers to the woman's vulva. The myth of Isis. One of the many myths of Isis, and perhaps the most famous, is the story of her great love for Osiris. Isis cares for her dead husband Osiris and brings him back to life with her love. She also tends the dead. The power and patience of love is the gift Isis brings from thousands of years ago. Inscribed in stunning hieroglyphs, the great hymn to Isis is found in the pyramid texts, which date back to 2491 BCE. Later, the myth was recorded by Plutarch, the Greek historian and philosopher. The goddess Isis was the first daughter of Geb, god of the earth, and Nut, the goddess of the overarching sky. Isis was born on the first day between the first years of creation and was adored by her human followers. Isis was the goddess of the earth in ancient Egypt and loved her brother Osiris. When they married, Osiris became the first king of the earth. Their brother Set, immensely jealous of their powers, murdered Osiris so he could usurp the throne. Set did this by tricking Osiris into stepping into a beautiful box made of cedar, ebony, and ivory that he had ordered built to fit only Osiris. Set then sealed it up to become a coffin and threw it into the river. The river carried the box out to sea. It washed up in another country, resting in the upper boughs of a tamarisk tree when the waters receded. The branches covered the box, encapsulating the god in his coffin in the trunk of the tree. In a state of inconsolable grief, Isis tore her robes to shreds and cut off her beautiful black hair. When she finally regained her emotional balance, Isis set out to search for the body of her beloved Osiris so that she might bury him properly. The search took Isis to Phoenicia, where she met Queen Astarte. Astarte didn't recognize the goddess and hired her as a nursemaid to the infant prince. Fond of the young boy, Isis decided to bestow immortality on him. As she was holding the royal infant over the fire as part of the ritual, the queen entered the room. Seeing her son smoldering in the middle of the fire, Astarte instinctively, but naively, grabbed the child out of the flames, undoing Isis's magic, which would have made her son a god. When the queen demanded an explanation, Isis revealed her identity and told Astarte of her quest to recover her husband's body. As she listened to the story, Astarte realized that the body was hidden in the fragrant tree in the center of the palace, and she told Isis where to find it. Sheltering his broken body in her arms, Isis carried the body of Osiris back to Egypt for proper burial. There she hid it in the swamps on the delta of the Nile River. Unfortunately, Set came across the box one night when he was out hunting. Infuriated by this turn of events and determined not to be outdone, he murdered Osiris once again, this time hacking his body into 14 pieces and throwing them in different directions, knowing that they would be eaten by the crocodiles. Isis searched and searched, accompanied by 7 scorpions who assisted and protected her. Each time she found new pieces, she rejoined them to reform his body. But Isis could only recover 13 of the pieces. The 14th, his penis, had been swallowed by a crab, so she fashioned one from golden wax. Inventing the rites of embalming and speaking some words of magic, Isis brought her husband back to life. Magically, Isis then conceived a child with Osiris and gave birth to Horus, who later became the sun god. Assured that having the infant would now relieve Isis's grief, Osiris was free to descend to become the king of the underworld, ruling over the dead and the sleeping. Osiris's spirit, however, frequently returned to be with Isis and the young Horus, who both remained under his watchful and loving eye. Isis was worshipped throughout the Greco-Roman world. During the 4th century, when Christianity was gaining a foothold in the Roman Empire, her worshippers founded the first Madonna cults so as to keep her influence alive. Some early Christians even called themselves Pastafori, meaning the shepherds or servants of Isis, which may be where the word pastor originated. Author Ian Begg found in his research that the city of Paris was indeed built as a center for Isis, explaining that it is the original meaning of its name, Paris. Paris is also another place with great devotion to the Black Madonna. The original name was Lutetia of the Parisi. It was named after a tribe of Celts known as the Parisi during the Roman era of the 1st to the 4th century. The Parisians were the followers of Isis, who was known as the chief goddess of the Greco-Egyptian Empire. Isis appearing to Lucius Apuleius at his final initiation. The following passage from the Golden Ass, which recounts Isis appearing to Lucius Apuleius, was put to haunting music by composer John La Barbera for our opera The Voyage of the Black Madonna, which I sang with great passion in the Italian translation. Behold, I am in your presence, having been stirred by your prayers, O Lucius, I, the parent of the things of nature, mistress of the elements, firstborn of the ages, highest divinity, queen of the dead, first among the gods, single appearance of gods and goddesses, I who dispense by my commands the bright summit of the sky, the healing winds of the sea, the mournful silences of the world below, I whose single divinity as whole of the world is venerated in the form of many shapes, various rites, and under many a name. Thence firstborn Phrygians call me Pesinuntia, Mother of God. From there the autochtones of Attica call me Cesropean Minerva. The floating Cyprians call me Paphian Venus. Arrow-carrying Cretans call me Diana Dictina. The trilingual Sicilians call me Stygian Proserpina. The Aleutians call me the ancient goddess Ceres. Some call me Juno, others Bellona. Those men of yours call me Hecate, and those men there call me Rhamnusia. And the Ethiopians, who are illuminated by the nascent rays of the dawning sun god, and the Africans and the Egyptians, being strong in ancient doctrines, and honoring me with the proper rites, call me by my true name, Queen Isis. Another interesting quote from Egyptologist Armando May discusses the relationship between Isis and the theological and cosmological traditions of southern Italy. In archaeological terms, it is now clear that after the fall of Egypt, all theological traditions and rituals were preserved by Isis's priests, who went on to found the so-called Theological School of Alexandria of Egypt, or Didaskalion, during the 2nd century BC. Its followers crossed over the Mediterranean Sea, heading for Italy and its islands, such as Sicily. During the Greeks' domination in southern Italy, also known as Magna Graecia, the school had a strong influence on customs and traditions, and progressively changed all religious beliefs. For the first time in ages, the populations of southern Italy began to worship a new goddess, coming from the mysterious land of Egypt, known as the Black Land, or Alcheme, from which the term alchemy comes. The Black Goddess, the alchemist deity, she who turns visible into invisible, the whore and the saint, the bride and the virgin, slowly became the most worshipped deity in southern Italy, influencing also the Romans' theological traditions. Archaeologists unearthed many artifacts and found several of Isis's temples, particularly in the region of Campania, in the ancient towns of Pompeii, Herculaneum, and Oplantis, actually known as Torre Annunziata, where the Emperor Nero's wife's impressive villa was found. Archaeologists found in Beneventum Isis's greatest temple in southern Italy, which testifies to the vital importance of the goddess in the popular religion of that time. In Pompeii and Herculaneum ruins, many frescoes are witness of the Egyptian goddess influence in daily life. Many scenes of mysterious rituals show the devotion of the southern Italian population for the Black Goddess. How did the rituals work? What were the purposes? Observing the Egyptian paintings and bas-reliefs, we can assume that the core of Isis's function was to convey energy to enable the pharaoh's soul to be reborn, using particular tools such as the waji, the stick of power generally used by goddesses and characterized by a lotus flower at the top. That flower symbolized the lifeblood, the cosmic energy for rebirth. Temple of Dendera bas-reliefs clearly reveal the goal, showing Isis appearing as the Hathor goddess, giving life to a dead pharaoh. Relation between Isis and energy was preserved during the Roman period, and the tradition has spread even to the 1800s. Therefore, since ancient times, the Black Goddess changed relationship between man and nature to the eyes of mankind, introducing a unitary model based on cosmological energies implemented through specific rituals. That is why the Isis hymn of Nag Hammadi is essential to understand the core of the new cosmological theology coming from Egypt. It is crucial to take a careful approach to deeply understand the meaning of its duality and the goddess's evolution as Madonna Nera of Christianity. I'm confident that the love story between Dario and me is deeply connected to the Black Madonna and, in a way, also to Isis. Dario and I resonated with the myth of Isis and Osiris in a big way, and we studied it avidly in various texts. We felt that there was a strong affinity between Isis's myth and our unusual love story. In some ways, I felt like Isis, so in love and full of compassion for her lover, using her magical powers and flying to bring Osiris, who had been symbolically killed and dismembered, back to life. Yes, I felt like Isis because I flew back and forth to Italy many times for several years to be in the arms of my beloved Dario, Osiris, each time restoring back to life a piece of his lost soul. Dario's beautiful soul and heart had been shattered when he was a child by abuse from his father and by an overprotective, controlling mother. To self-medicate, Dario became part of the superficial aspect of his gentleman's sex, drugs, and rock and roll credo. His shadow and his dark side grew stronger with his drug use, and his self-esteem diminished. I became Dario's goddess, his Isis, restoring him into a whole person, celebrating his full resurrection. This was especially true after the miracle of the moving star on the crown of the Madonna della Libera. I learned about magic during that time, and like Isis, would have done anything to keep my soulmate and me together. Dario and I were married right after performing the Voyage of the Black Madonna at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. We were happy for many years, and in my dreams I still see Dario smiling and thanking me for the love I gave him. The women who serve the goddess and the Black Madonna as healers always want to nourish and transform the weaknesses and wounds of the men they love, just like Isis restored the dead Osiris. I spent years working on this aspect of my devotion. At times I felt that I had to protect myself, both emotionally and physically, to be able to continue my work. My experience healing Dario from drug addiction through the Black Madonna also taught me that I can be the vehicle of the miracle, but I cannot accomplish that transformation unless the person, the man, is willing to shed the dark side and walk into the light. I often see Brunatella or hear her speak to me. When I take other people to see her on the pilgrimages I lead to Moiano, they have had similar experiences. They break down in tears as we chant together to La Madonna della Libera, who has the power to free us all from our sadness, troubles, addictions, and disease. All you must do is believe. Chants and prayers to Madonna Brunatella, Madonna della Libera, and Isis. I learned these chants, which you will find in the appendix to chapter 5, from the wise old women in the procession following the statue of Our Lady Freedom. The women had an immense power when they were chanting, and I felt as if their voices came from the womb of the earth herself. Their faces reminded me of the matriarchal society of ancient Magna Graecia. Most of these women lived hard lives, working in the fields and giving birth to many children. They were skilled midwives and knew how to cure the sick, using special herbs. The women learned this healing through an oral tradition. The area of Moyano, from which this chant comes, is also known for the female healers who can take away il malocchio, the evil eye. I learned how to do this too, and share it in chapter 6 when I describe my journey to Calabria. Most of these folk healers were originally known as guaritrici. These were not the female healers who later in the Middle Ages and during the Renaissance became known as streghe or witches, who were persecuted by the Catholic Church during the Inquisition. However, at that time the Church also tried to repress the practices of these herbal healers. This past summer, for the first time in 15 years, I was blessed to hear the voice of the lead singer from Moyano, Rosetta, whom I mentioned before. She saw me singing in the chapel together with the group of women whom I had brought with me during my pilgrimage to the sacred sites of the Black Madonna. Even if we had not seen each other in a very long time, we recognized each other immediately from the years when I followed Brunatella's procession with her. Showing great affection, she hugged me and all the women in my group and took us to the feet of the statue of Our Lady of Freedom and began to sing for us, asking me to harmonize with her. I was honored and did my best to follow her powerful voice, even though I was crying and was overcome with emotions. I was amazed to see that her voice is just as strong as before, and understood that it is indeed a miracle of the Black Madonna, who wants Rosetta at age 86 to sing for her and teach others until her last day on this earth. You can use these prayers to heal others, also invoking the healing power of the goddess Isis, the mother and queen of all healers. If you have loved ones who suffer from addiction, direct this chant at them. You can chant alone or with a chorus, but remember to really open the vowels when you say Eviva Maria and Madonna della Libera. There is no need to use instruments, as these chants are traditionally done a cappella. You can also take an altar with the image of Our Lady of Freedom. Near her, remember to keep a flower or candle or photos of the people who are in need of help. I suggest carrying a small picture of her with you when you are traveling as protection. I invite you to use these prayers to invoke the healing power of the earth and of Mother Mary in times of sadness, despair, disease, and loneliness, as well as in gratitude for all graces received. Chapter 6. The Devotion to the Black Madonna of the Poor. We hurry toward death. Let us desist from sin. I have resolved to write about the contempt of the world, that the now living will not bide their time in vain things. Now is the hour to rise from the evil sleep of death. Life is short, and shortly it will end. Death arrives faster than anyone fears. Death annihilates all, and has mercy with no one. From Liber Vermel, ad mortem festinamus pecare desistamus. The Middle Ages and musical exorcisms. I strongly believe that today we are living in a time similar to the Middle Ages, and for the past few years I have felt the urge to convey this message on stage by performing the musical I wrote in 2006 titled Tarantella Spider Dance. It includes a scene dedicated to the Black Madonna from Calabria, La Madonna dei Poveri, Our Lady of the Poor, and her trance drumming rituals dating back to medieval times of the plague, rituals still practiced today on her feast day. In the Middle Ages, people in Europe, and especially in parts of Italy, believed that the end of the world was coming, and they lived with a great fear of death by war, natural disaster, or contagious disease. They believed that the Black Madonna protected them. I am fascinated by the fact that it was during the so-called Dark Ages that all the Black Virgins came to life, with strong devotions in Italy, France, Spain, Turkey, and Greece. It is important to note that during the Byzantine Empire and at the time of the Crusades, our Christian nations mixed with those of the Moors through music and dance. When the plague spread all over Europe, decimating the population, people carried statues of the Black Madonna in powerful processions. They drummed and danced in circles and in a trance state and paraded through the streets to expel the fear of death and to stop the plague from coming to their villages. Through musical exorcisms, which used the obsessive 6/8 of the tarantella rhythms, identical to African drumming rituals, entire villages celebrated the miracles of the Black Madonna, protecting their towns from the plague, as well as from earthquakes and foreign invasions. This tradition is alive today, especially in the region of Calabria, and I firmly believe from my own experiences that the Black Madonna is alive today with the same power to protect us from the ongoing wars, disease, and political crises we experience. Tropea, August 14, 2016, the Feast of La Madonna dei Poveri. It was a beautiful summer night in Calabria, warm with a seductive breeze. I was listening to the relaxing sound of the waves of the Mediterranean Sea as I sat on a terrace at the Hotel Terrazzo sulle Mare in my beloved Tropea. This is a very intimate and charming small hotel built right on a cliff overlooking the beautiful turquoise sea, with ancient rock formations all around. Owned by a strong, attractive Calabrese woman, Maria, dark-skinned with piercing, wide black eyes, is one of the best chefs I have ever met, and she runs the whole place and the kitchen like a matriarch. Her husband obeys her and follows her like a student following a guru. Every year she gives me my favorite room, which opens onto a white and blue terrace, where I can watch the breathtaking sunsets, say my prayers, and meditate as I stare at the island of Stromboli with its active volcano. I have done many rituals on these beaches at sunset facing the volcano and will never forget that once, together with John and Dario, as I was chanting and drumming to Shango, the African Yoruba god of fire and thunder, lightning, thunder, and heavy rain arrived, and we had to run for our lives. Another time, to my great surprise, the volcano started smoking and shaking. Stromboli is one of the 7 Aeolian islands of Sicily, known also as the Seven Sisters. The volcano has been erupting for as long as records exist, some 2,000 years. The Romans called it the lighthouse of the Mediterranean. Locals refer to the volcano as Idu, a dialect word meaning simply hymn. The volcano gives its name to a category of eruption, Strombolian. Tourists flock to watch from a safe distance as lava and gas are ejected from craters just below the summit at intervals of roughly 20 minutes. In the daytime, this is visible as a plume of gas that looks like smoke. At night, you can see fiery red fountains shooting upward. Stromboli has been inhabited for thousands of years. It has great similarities with the Big Island in Hawaii, which also has an active volcano, where they worship the black goddess Pele, another aspect of the Black Madonna. Tropea is my favorite little town, and I am even more attached to it than to my native Rome. I have been coming here since 1980, when I was young and curious to learn everything about this ancient folk music and dance tradition, secretly being guided to the Black Madonna in this town. Only now, 37 years later, do I realize that she called me here. Here in this beautiful white medieval town carved in tufo stone, I have learned powerful rituals, rhythms, and dances, received the wisdom of the elders, and honestly had some of the best parties of my life, which often ended with sensual and romantic love. I was in Calabria to celebrate on August 14th, the Feast of the Madonna of the Poor, the Black Madonna of Seminara. I have been devoted to this Madonna since the first time I visited her in 1987, and I was especially looking forward to the festivities that honor her ascension into heaven. The first ritual of the Feast of La Madonna dei Poveri was a real invitation. Trying to convince someone to go with me was quite difficult, as this town is known not only for the Black Madonna, but also for its strong mafia. So I had come back to Calabria alone to continue my research. I knew from Professor Satriani and various anthropology books I had read that on this day the Feast of the Black Madonna was celebrated with giant puppets, reenacting an ancient fertility rite and wild drumming. a ritual that affirmed our connection with Africa, so close to Calabria, at the end of the Italian boot. Only a few months before, I had had the amazing experience awakening from anesthesia with the vision of the Black Madonna over my bed, followed by the mystical experience of flying over the Pacific Ocean near the California coast and hearing the voice of Mother Earth. My perception and sensitivity were completely transformed. I felt clear and ready. A portal had now been opened, and so I had decided to write an opera dedicated to the Black Madonna and her healing power. Acting on that decision, I hopped into Dario's Fiat and drove all the way down to Calabria from Rome, 740 kilometers, which was quite dangerous at that time, as the highway, the Salerno Reggio, had the highest death tolls due to accidents in all of Europe. Ultimately, the road was never completed because of the power of the local mafia, which controlled even the highway, with no intervention by the Italian government. After a 10-hour drive alone, literally risking my life and praying to arrive in one piece, I made it to Calabria. With me were images of the Black Madonna. I made little altars in the Fiat. My poor mother was terrified and had asked Dario not to give me his car, but he knew that this trip was very important, so I promised to call both my mother and him as often as possible from the only working phones on the broken-down highway. When I finally got to Viba Marina near Tropea, I went to visit my good friends at the infamous campground Cursal, described in earlier chapters, where all the folk musicians would come to hang out and play for fun, and sometimes for money, food, or wine, and where every year I learned incredible amounts of material, folk legends, folk songs and chants, intricate rhythms, tamburello styles, and the fast tarantella calabresi. We always stayed up until sunrise and slept little. Because the cabins were full of mosquitoes and the bunk beds were so uncomfortable, we often slept on the white sand beaches. Those were some of the most beautiful times of my life, which I cherished deeply and which inspired me to grow as an artist. I was extremely happy to see my good Calabrese friend Vittorio de Paula, the master folk musician who became my life guru through the years and whom I consider one of my teachers to this day. Together with Raffaele and Serra, the Tamuriata master from Gragnano, we all met in that memorable summer of 1980, and they became my real tribe. Vittorio and I shared many adventures, as well as field research on the folk traditions and various processions for saints, like San Rocco and the Madonnas, always accompanied by ritual drumming and dances. I begged him and his family to go with me to see and take part in the feast of La Madonna dei Poveri in the town of Seminara, province of Reggio Calabria. I was surprised to see that my Calabrese friends laughed at me, telling me that I was pazza, crazy. Recently, there had been a heavy faida, a dangerous fight between local mafia families, and many people had died. No one really wanted to go there, not even for the feast. Because I was not born in Calabria, I could not really comprehend what my friends meant in their attempts to warn me. All I knew was that I felt guided by the Madonna to go see her on such an important day and celebration in her honor. I kept telling everyone that on her feast day she would protect us. The only one who had the courage to go with me was a young man from Rome named Lucio, a student of anthropology and a folk musician. He was very dark, quite handsome, and looked Calabrese, which was a good thing. We knew no outsiders would dare go to this town due to the latest news, and we had to find a way to blend in with the locals. Lucio drove the Fiat for me and warned me to change clothes and look less conspicuous to avoid attracting attention as a foreigner, especially after such a series of shootings. I followed his advice and hid my camera in my bag, but I openly carried my tambourine, which became my passport everywhere I went. When the locals saw that I could play their tarantella calabrese, all suspicion vanished. We drove down the road, wrongly called a highway, toward Reggio Calabria. It had only 2 lanes, and it was pitch dark at night with no roadway illumination. As we approached the exit for Seminara, I was astonished to see giant olive trees around us. They seemed to be thousands of years old. I thought that here is the earth at her best, so rich in her gifts to us. The word seminara comes from semen, Latin for seed. Seminare in Italian means to plant seeds in the earth. From the trees and the name of the town, it was very clear to me how this Black Madonna must be connected to the earth. We had to park far from town, since the whole town was closed for the procession. As we walked on the narrow cobblestone streets, people looked at us a little cautiously. But when I asked about the feast of La Madonna Nera and showed them my tamburello, they all laughed and said, "Benvenuta figlia, a Madonna t'accompagna." Welcome, daughter, the Madonna accompanies you. I was intrigued by the many ceramic stores displaying beautiful folk art, which included statues of the Madonna dei Poveri, as well as devil masks, gargoyles, goddesses such as Demeter and Persephone, and naturally our favorite god, Bacchus. I knew that I had to get one of the Madonna statues, but also knew that I had to see her, the real one, first. As we were getting closer to the church, the street decorations and local crafts sold by vendors were extremely attractive and festive, as was the local food being cooked in the street. The air was filled with strong smells of goat meat, sausages, and sweet almond pastries. There were also tambourine makers selling beautiful handcrafted goatskin tambourines. I tried them, playing their fast rhythms, making quite an impression as a woman and not a local. I decided that at the end of the feast I had to get one of those special tambourines blessed by the Madonna Nera. Then suddenly I heard drumming, very powerful loud drumming, snare drums. As the sound got closer, I started running up the hill and shouting to Lucio, "Let's find the drummers." So taken by the music, we both felt that we were in Africa and not in Italy any longer. At the top of the hill we found a group of about 20 snare drummers, along with a bass drummer and a cymbalist, marching and playing at an obsessive loud and fast 6/8 rhythm. It was a tarantella beat, but felt African and tribal. The leader of the team was a tiny man with a thick mustache who was playing super fast with his drumsticks, making intricate patterns. He had a beautiful proud face as he directed the group of drummers. It was there that I also saw the most beautiful giant puppets, called I Giganti, dancing toward us in a sensuous tarantella, processing behind the drummers, who stopped to make a circle so that the puppeteers could take center stage. One of the puppets was a stunning black African king, the mythological Grifone. Dressed in green, red, and gold, he wore a crown and was courting in a dance the beautiful white Italian queen, the mythical Mata, smiling in a gold cape and a red and blue dress. In this dancing courtship, Mata and Grifone fall in love, and their union represents the coming together of African and southern Italian cultures. I had been using puppets in our theater group for a few years and always wanted to find some information about this tradition, which I knew was very old, dating back to the Middle Ages. I was fascinated by the art of the puppeteers, who were hidden inside the giant puppets, and had such a beautiful, elegant way of dancing the tarantella and recreating a sensual courtship between the African king and the Italian queen. The historic roots of the dance of the Giganti are probably Aragonese. During Spanish rule and in the time of the Turkish invasions, these influences came to Calabria with the Moors. It is interesting that this tradition is found not only in Calabria, but also is popular in Messina, Sicily, for the Feast of the Assumption of Mary on August 15th, and even in Spain, Malta, and Belgium, although always slightly altered and with other myths as the background. Later I found this same tradition during the carnival in Recife in northeast Brazil. The ritual dance of the giants is a true triumph of the love between the white queen Mata and the black African king Grifone. Stirred on by the rhythmic beat of drums, the dance is then sealed with an embrace and a kiss, symbolizing peace among our cultures and races. I was curious about this pagan sensual ritual and did not know another surprise was coming, a more erotic fertility ritual. The drums got louder, and I saw a dark-skinned man dressed in white and blue dancing with a palio, large flag, in a very unusual way. He looked very proud as he held the huge blue flag with golden stars between his legs and performed an extremely phallic dance with the pole tied to his arm. He danced in a circle and also dropped down on his knees in a circular motion, whirling as if caressing the earth, to the loud 6/8 rhythm of the tarantella, played on the snare drums. I jumped up and decided to follow this wild man and the drummers. They all smiled at me, and I noticed that they all had large mustaches like the leader. Even the flag bearer sported a big mustache. He had a lovely, benevolent smile, and nodded me to follow him through the streets toward the procession of La Madonna Nera. I realized that this ritual, rich in symbolism, was probably older than the Middle Ages. No wonder so many anthropologists had studied it through the years. Feeling the fast rhythm inside my bones and pulsating in my heart, I began dancing in a circular motion, following the steps of the flag bearer and the I Giganti through the winding streets, up and down, not thinking at all that I could break an ankle or fall on the cobblestones. I was feeling deliriously happy and light as I spun around in circles. As I danced to this African accented rhythm, I arrived in front of the beautiful basilica, where a huge crowd was screaming "Evviva Maria" as the stunning statue of the Black Madonna de Poveri was, at that moment, coming out of the church. The Madonna of the Poor. There she was, unbelievably powerful and mysterious. At the sight of her, I felt completely ecstatic. Finally, I saw a beautiful black statue, which looked very ancient, with a strange enigmatic smile and face that seemed so alive, staring at all of us with no real eyes, yet looking alive. Dressed in a simple, ancient-looking, earth-colored tunic, her face was the color of the earth herself, dark brown, and astonishingly to me, she had blonde hair, wearing beautiful silver jewelry, large earrings and necklaces. She looked North African and even gypsy. Her black son Jesus stood on her lap, holding a globe in his hands. A group of 12 men dressed in white and blue carried her out of the church. It was clear that the statue was very heavy, as the Queen of Heaven's incredible throne is made of solid silver and gold. 2 golden angels perched above her on each side were holding an oriental-looking canopy with elaborate decorations. I stared at her and wondered why it is that this Black Madonna, who has blonde hair, wears a very simple earth-colored tunic with no other colors on her, but is surrounded by a heavily decorated and precious throne. Her own altar. She was an unusual, ancient-looking, mysterious, and enigmatic statue, almost 1 meter tall, yet she looked bigger. She seemed to be staring at me from above her throne, smiling as if she were happy that I had finally arrived. This was my feeling, again to be welcomed by her as her daughter. The devotion of the Black Madonna of the Poor. As they started the procession from the church through the town, the huge crowd followed, with the local band playing out of tune, weird-sounding music, similar to the famous Fellini's film scores, and everyone showing deep emotions, screaming "Evviva Maria." I decided to follow, not knowing how long it would be. I began to cry, my voice joining with the crowd. The drumming in the back sounded like ta-ta, ta-ta-ta, ta-ta, ta-ta-ta, and the bass drum sounded boom, boom, boom. Cymbals crashed loudly at the accents of the tarantella. My heart was with the drums, my soul with the Madonna, and my mind seemed to be gone, somewhere lost in the mists of time, returned to the Middle Ages.